I'm Lisa Capalla. Welcome to Where's Wilmington? Well, I'm sure you all know the holiday season is upon us. And today I want to talk a little bit and share a little bit actually about what it's like to be a family historian. I'm the one in my family. I'm the one who retells all the stories over and over again. And I think that's part of what family is about, sharing the nostalgia and the legends and the history. So today I am very blessed to have with me Mr. William Bill to his friend Shields. Nice to meet you.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thanks
Thank
for
you
coming.
for having me.
And we're going to talk about this book that he wrote called The Farewell Christmas. It is about mostly his brother Jackie, but a little bit broader. It's really more about humanity and life and really savoring every moment. So let's talk a little bit about the story, The Farewell Christmas itself, and what made you want to write a book.
Well, as a kid of 9 years old, my brother Jackie was a fighter pilot in the Navy, and he actually flew with the Blue Angels, and he flew with many air shows. And he came home for Christmas in 1956. I was a 9-year-old kid, a mischievous little kid, and he was my hero coming home. I mean, we came from an ethnic part of town. I'm an odd combination. I'm half Italian, half Scottish, and we lived in the Italian section of town. And Jackie was one of the first ones from we called it the village, the first one from the village that kind of made it. He graduated college and went on to become a fighter pilot, and so he was coming home for that Christmas, and it was just a memorable Christmas that we had. He came home and shared his love, and he was a very loving person, and spent time with us and spent time with me. And as I explained in the book, he took me around my paper route, and if you can believe, I had a paper route at 9 years old, delivering the evening edition of the paper. Back then it was the Herald, the Record American, to the Globe, and the Christian Science Monitor.
Right.
And I delivered it at night to 65. I'm surprised they haven't dug my mother up for child abuse for sending a 9-year-old out to deliver newspapers. But things were different back.
That's how things were.
Things were different back then.
It was safer, I think.
So he came around and took me around my paper route, and it was a memorable time. Memorable Christmas. We had an old-fashioned Christmas with the Feast of the Seven Fishes, where you eat 7 fishes on Christmas Eve, and it was just a wonderful time. He made it memorable. He was a bright guy. He got 2 double promotions in school. He graduated high school at 16 and graduated college the day he turned 20. Then he went into the Navy flight program, and again became a fighter pilot, and again had a wonderful time that Christmas. And he left to go back to Miramar Naval Air Base in San Diego, and he died a couple of weeks later in a plane crash. And it was very sad and tragic. And
it was funny to me too, reading the book. He was 23, you were 9.
Yeah.
That's a big age difference. So looking at the way you wrote the book, which is excellent, by the way, and I really loved the local references. I had worked in Winchester many years, so I could picture a lot of the places that you were talking about that still exist in Winchester, which is pretty nice. But looking back at that, at 9 years old, there's no way you could have known some of the things that you write about in this book. So how did you learn the information that you had? Because a 9-year-old doesn't view things the way a grown-up does.
Unfortunately, or fortunately, whichever way you look at it, the Shields family has an odd strand of DNA that my brother and my 2 sisters have, that we remember everything. I mean, it's scary. You don't want to play Trivial Pursuit with us. That's
right.
But no, I did do a lot of research.
Right.
I actually talked to 3 of people that were in his squadron, and one was an eyewitness to the plane crash, and he explained, and they were touched that I tracked him down and got a hold of him. Excellent. But I researched everything to make sure everything was
And we want to point out your brother's death was not pilot era, and it was not during combat time, just to be clear to folks.
It was a F-7U Cutlass, which was later known as the Gutless Cutlass and the Ensign Killer. It was just it didn't have a lot of thrust. It had a lot of problems, and those are the early stages of jet planes. So they had their mechanical errors, and it was just an unfortunate thing.
So when you started to decide to write this book, and I want you to tell the story of what actually kind of propelled you forward to do that, how painful was it for you looking back at that time?
Well, I guess in time we get to realize that things happen, and we have no control over them, and either you accept them or you roll over and cry all the time. Right. So we moved on, and again, it was a sad situation. But that particular Christmas and the memory of him being home and the memory of my two sisters and my brother, Tony, that are still with me, Ellen and Gloria are my two sisters. I want to make sure and they, we just had a loving family. And my grandfather lived down the street, and my old-fashioned Italian my two aunts that never married, they lived down the street from us, so we had our own compound. But to get back what you had asked me, I did do a lot of research, and I talked to a lot of people to find out make sure all the stories were. The one about there's one in there about VJ Day, when one of my brother's friends has an accident and so forth. I don't want to give the story away about the book because it's
really good. You should pick it up and take a look at it.
But the family structure was such that I looked up to my older brother and my two older brothers and my older sisters, and I was blessed that I had a loving and caring family that made it memorable so that I could remember the things that happened. It was a memorable Christmas.
And, I don't know if a book can do this, but it did it for me. It made me feel family. When I read it, I had a sense of, I'm 47. I come from, I think, a gentler time. We went to my grandparents every Sunday for supper. Things have changed a lot in our culture since then, for the good and the bad. But reading this made me feel like I was reading a cup of cocoa, if you could do that. Well, it felt very warm and nostalgic and almost like the Waldens, really, like you would want life to be if you could paint it into a picture,
Well, contrary to what you may, we did have.
Well, you left out all bad stuff.
Not really, as a kid, a 9-year-old kid, you look and you say, life is good. I mean, I had all the things I needed, and no, we had a wonderful, again, time as a family growing up, and things were different back then. They were a little slower and easier paced, and we didn't have the, I would almost call them distractions we have nowadays we didn't have those back then, so we had to spend time together. It's almost like a forceful thing that we played games and we did things, and I put in there that we were a teasing family. I got teased an awful lot. My sister Gloria still calls me Chicken Bones, although I surely don't look like Chicken Bones, but that was my nickname when I was little. And Jackie teased me. They all teased me, but that's what you do to the youngest brother. But it was playful. It was we were able to interact with one another.
And I also like the connection between your grandparents or your grandfather and the family too. I really love to see that, and I don't think we see much of that anymore. And I think that's important because I don't think you can know about your character unless you can examine your history.
Well, part of my objective was to make you feel like you're part of the story. And the feedback I've had from those that have read it said that they felt like they were part of the family when they read the book. And that was my objective, to make it so that you felt like you were involved in my family. And my grandfather was, if you look back at, my mother went to work when I started kindergarten. So I would walk from the Lincoln School to Grandpa's house. Grandpa was 80 years old, had lost a leg to diabetes.
Right.
So he had a wooden leg, could barely speak English. Where they lived, on one side were railroad tracks, and the other side was a double-line street. There was a cut-through street. And I was 5 years old, and I was told, Grandpa's going to watch you.
Right.
So the poor guy couldn't get out of the house if the house was on fire, but Grandpa was going to watch me. But I survived.
Yeah, it's almost like maybe more like you were watching him really at some point.
Yeah, we had a great relationship, Grandpa and I, and as I put in the book, he was a diabetic, and every day I'd come home from school and he'd ask me if I was a good boy, then he'd give me a nickel and I'd run up to the corner store, and back in those days for a nickel you could get a bag full of candy.
Oh, sure.
And I'd bring it back home, knowing full well that Grandpa wanted some of the candy.
Being that he was diabetic, right?
So I'd as soon as I walked in the door, I'd give him the bag, and he'd go through the bag, and he always picked, if you remember, the waxed lips.
Oh, sure.
He liked the way he used to break them off and chew the waxed lips, but I always gave Grandpa first shot at the candy. But
excellent. I know obviously from the title, The Farewell Christmas, we know that it may have a bittersweet ending, we'll call it, you know. Yeah, I think one of the ironic things is none of us ever knows when our last day or our last Christmas or our last whatever will be. So I think it's really great that you had something you could draw from that was beautiful, that you could turn into a tribute to his life and your family's way of life.
Well, it has, and what it's done, what it did for my family, we learn to appreciate life a lot, knowing full well that it ends when you don't expect it to.
Right, right.
And I'm very close with my brother and my two sisters, and we still get together as often as we can. Gloria's in South Carolina, Ellen's at the Cape, and Tony's in Billerica. But we try to get together, and we've really had a close relationship. Closer more so because we lost our brother,
Right.
and we know what it's like to lose someone, and it made it so that we appreciate life more.
Right. And I think I can relate to that. I lost my dad when I was very young, and it brought us even closer together than we were, because you do get a sense of the fleetingness that is life.
Which it is, and it's...
So when you told your family, the teasing family that you have, that you were going to write a book about Jackie, how did everybody react to that?
We had talked about, my sister Ellen and I had talked about it, because there's so many stories, so many things happen.
Right.
And said, always, we should write a book, and I'll go into what had happened. My dad died in November of '80. My mother died in May of '82, about a year and a half apart. And after they passed away, we sold a house in Winchester in the Village. And my brother Tony, that's 3 years older than me, gave me a box and said, "This is for you. Thank you." It stayed in one house for 11 years. I moved to another house at 14 years, and then the house I've been now 6 years. Never looked at the box. It was October of 2009. It was a rainy Saturday, and I usually play golf on Saturdays. And I went out and got coffee and the newspaper, and came back, and it's about 8:30, and my wife said, "I'd like to go to Kittery to the outlets. Would you like to come with me for the day?" I said, so I politely declined.
Right.
She left. I sat there. It was pouring rain. I had already read the newspaper. I said, "What am I going to do with myself?" And something told me to go get that box. And I went down and got that box and brought it upstairs, and I was amazed. My mother saved everything. Every letter that my brother had written her, every letter she had written him, all of the pictures, all of the letter from the Secretary of the Navy, letter from the Secretary of Defense, and all of the letters after he passed away. And I said, "This is amazing." So I said, I didn't know my brother that well, because he was so much
Right.
older than me, and he was off to college and in the service, and I read those letters. And if you don't mind, I'd like
Sure.
to,
Sure.
I had organized these, and see, back in the 50s, they used to write letters.
Right.
And here's the letters that start in June of 1951.
Wow.
And go all the way up until his last letter was, I think, January 26, 1957. So these are all the letters that he had written. And I sat there that Saturday morning and went through them, and it was like I was in a time warp. Next thing you know, I looked up, it was like 5 o'clock at night. Like I had, and I have to admit, when I got to the end and I'm looking at the pictures, and the tear came down. I said, "He's the poor kid was 23 years old. He gave his life for his country, and he's gone." So I became obsessed with, I've got to put this stuff together. And what I did was I went out and got 3-ring binders and plastic sleeves, and I put them all together. I wound up filling up 6. I only brought 4 tonight. I filled up 6 3-ring binders. Wow. And it became almost like a mission for me too. And while I went through that process, I got to know him better. I got to understand him better. And it was late November when I finished, and I had my brother and sister come over. The one in South Carolina couldn't make it. So,
right.
And I went through all of this with them, and they were thrilled at what I had done. And I was, again, weighing heavy on my mind. I remember going to work and Googling Lieutenant John Shields, and nothing came up. And I went to all the different search engines, and nothing came up. And I went so far as to go to Miramar Naval Air Base, where his plane crash took place, and under the Freedom of Information Act, I was able to go back to February 2nd, 1957, when he died, and they had the daily log. Nothing there. They didn't have a thing about his accident.
So you needed to do this.
So I said, geez, in the eyes of the world, it's like he never existed. So I said, I want to pay him a tribute, and I decided to, that's when I decided to write The Farewell Christmas.
Excellent.
Yeah.
We're going to take our midpoint break here with Bill Shields. We could go on a lot longer. We got another 15 minutes. So folks, stay with us. We're going to talk a little bit more about this book, The Farewell Christmas, and a little bit more about family and nostalgia and family history and keeping it alive and how important that really is. So stay with us. We'll be back with more of Where's Wilmington right after this.
Welcome to Fogel's.
Beautiful, isn't it?
You expect options everywhere else. Why not with your medical treatment? Talk with your doctor to explore all your options and find what's right for you. Visit ahrq.gov.
Hi there, welcome back to Where's Wilmington. I'm Lisa Capalla, and my guest today is William Bill Shields, the writer of The Farewell Christmas, which is available where?
Okay, Bookends in Winchester Center has it, and Amazon.com, and I think they're running a special on it. You have to check it. And from the publisher at Tate Publishing, and I gave you the,
Yes, we'll put that
the link,
information up
and
for
they're going to
folks.
put the link up. So makes a great Christmas present. It's a G-rated story. It's
Right.
a couple of minor little things in there about the bully.
Oh, I thought it was fine. It's
and-
so tame compared to everything else you read
I have
out
to
there.
I have to tell if
Sure, go ahead.
in the book he's not a bully. He's just an older, a couple of years older, and he was a big kid, and he's still a big guy. I heard from him a couple of weeks ago, and our families were always friends, and he called me up, and when I was young they called me Billy. He says, "Billy, I understand you wrote a book, and I'm one of the characters in the
Right.
book." I said, "Yes, you are." And he said, "I tried to buy it at the bookstore, but they ran out of books." I says, "I'll drop one off to you." So I went by his house, and we just had a great time, him and his wife and I, and reminiscing about it. But yeah, the characters in the book were all people that I grew up with. And
Nice. What was it like for you to walk into Bookends in Winchester and see your book on the counter? What does that feel like?
It's been a surreal situation. I did not write this to become a best-selling author.
Right.
I wrote this more as a history for my kids who never knew their uncle, and for my brother's children and my sister's children. They were cheated out of knowing what a great person Jackie was. And I wrote that, and I wrote it in manuscript form, and I gave them all a copy, and I let some people read it, and they said, "Geez, this is really good." And I said, "Yeah, you told me that because you're my friend." And enough people told me, I said, "Geez, maybe there's
Right.
something here." So I went online and found a literary consultant, and all he does is gives you a thumbs up, thumbs down. He has no financial interest, and so I sent him the manuscript, and he got back to me a week or so later. He said, "This is a tremendous story. It has a great commercial value. It's a great story. I strongly urge you to continue with it." So I said, "Geez, this is good." So I had another literary person to help me organize it.
Right.
I had to, he had blonde hair and blue eyes and a scar over his cheek and so forth. They want a little more discreet. So
Right.
helped me organize it and put it together. And I was fortunate that Tate Publishing made me an offer to publish the book.
So how
which
long
was
did
great.
it take from the time that you wrote it till you actually could hold the physical copy in your hand?
All right, I started in that December of 2009, and I have to tell you that it did not take me long to write the book. Once it was almost like the floodgates were open.
Well, divine inspiration, I think, is what you would call it, to be truthful.
I did say someone was over my shoulder
Who do you
helping
think
me.
that might have been?
Yeah,
Come on.
exactly. My brother's been watching. Some things have happened in my life that I look back now and say, he's been watching over me.
Right.
And it took a while sometimes for me to realize I'm saying, he's been keeping an eye on me, and God knows I need someone to keep an eye on me. So, no, it's been very beneficial. But the process did not take me long to write the book. I 3 or 4 weeks, and I would go through these thought sessions where I'm not the greatest typer in the world, and I suggest anyone who wants to become an author that they make sure they take typing lessons.
Right, right.
And my fingers couldn't keep up with my my brain.
Right.
And so I would go through it, and the thoughts would come back, and what we did, and so forth. And then I organized it, and again, the publisher, I think I did 3 or 4 edits on it. I had first written it in past tense, and then the publisher wanted it in present tense, so I had to change the whole format. And
Right.
But it took. It was released in August of this year, so it took from the time I started writing it, which would have been December of 2009, until August of this year.
What did you learn about yourself through this process?
Well, I learned that everyone has a book in them.
That's true.
It just takes some coaxing to get it out. Everyone has a story. Right. Everyone has, and just to get it. And I've realized that, you know, it's one of those bucket list things that I wanted to accomplish, and again, I felt that it was a good story, needed to be told, and my brother deserved the recognition. So, to answer your question, this has been a tremendous time for me.
Do you think it was healing for you?
Very much so, very much so, and
I don't think we can always know the effects of something traumatic like that, especially when you were so young, to process it all. So I'm sure going through the memorabilia and the family, and sitting with your family and reliving it.
If it happened in today's time, I'd have been in therapy for years, and you know, I mean, back then it was all right. It happened, you know. Put the macaroni water on, and we're going to eat.
Right. And I think the key with that is balance. You know, if you need therapy, great. If you can work it out through family, great. If you can do it through a hobby, great. Whatever works. But in those days, that really wasn't how we did things.
No, and my mother had 4 other children, and I have to give credit to my sister Ellen. Mom was, needless to say, down in the dumps, and said, "Mom, life is for the living. It was a bad thing that Jackie died, but you know, life goes on, and you've got 4 other children, so." It's important to keep an eye on them.
And you know, if it were
and
nowadays,
one little one that's a pain in the neck. So.
We could have put her on a medication or something, but that's not what That's not what you did. You just got through it.
That's what that's what the Italians invented wine for.
That's a good one. Yeah. Have you had anything happen from this book, similar to the story you told me about meeting the bully, that surprised you? Has anyone come up to you that you didn't expect and said, "Hey, you know"?
I have. I've gotten feedback from people I never expected to get it from, and the feedback I've received has been very positive. Again, it's like, are you telling this because you're my friend? But I've had, you know, strangers come up to me and say, geez, this is it's a wholesome story. It's a nostalgic story. It's a fun story. Needless to say, there's a sad epilogue. Right. But the
but you know what? That's how life is, and let's really tell it like it is. Not everything does. And
but the story itself, A Christmas of 1956, was a memorable time. Back then, we had school pageants in public school, which you'd never see today.
Right.
You know, the things that we did back then, a Feast of the Seven Fishes, where we went to the North End to get the eels, because that was part of the eels were the big, and you look back and say, but
I know, but that's how times were.
That's how they were,
yeah. And how important do you feel it is that you've left a legacy for your family, not only for Jackie and not for your immediate family, but for your kids and grandkids? Because I think family history is really important.
Yeah, again, it's putting it all in perspective and putting things on paper and having the book come out has been a tremendous, for me, a personal feeling for me. And for my brother, I pray for him every day, and I think of him all the time, as I do the rest of my family, and I have a whole long list. The older you get, the longer the list gets. And you just look and say, you know, I'm glad that I was able to tell this story. Right. Everyone that reads the book, I'm just thrilled that my objective was to get the story out to as many people as I can. And again, I didn't write it to be I said I don't think I'll make the New York Times bestseller list, but perhaps the Woburn Times bestseller list.
But you'll take it if you do, right?
Exactly.
You'll go to the ceremony. Also, I think, too, when you write this kind of novel, or whether it be poetry that you write for your family, whatever, I think it helps the other kids in the family realize why, oh, you're like your uncle, or you're like your aunt, you know. It's nice to know. My grandfather was a professional singer, and his stage name was Danny Kaye. My stage name is Lisa Kay. Yeah. Well, I didn't know that until my grandmother one day told me. So when you have these stories to draw on, I think it helps you feel more grounded as a person. You know.
My brother Tony son, John, just had a baby, and he named him after my brother Jack, and he named him Jack after my brother Jackie. And he read the book, and he says, "Uncle Bill," he said, I never knew Uncle Jackie, and
Exactly.
this is just great." And that was my objective. And
Right.
my nephew, my sister Ellen's son, John Delagrati, came to the book signing we did in Winchester, and John got a bunch of books, and he just giving them out to all his friends, because he said, this is my uncle. This
Right.
is not only his uncle that wrote it, but his uncle that the story is about. And,
Right.
and he's been thrilled.
And it's really good to have something that's tangible. You know, as I said at the beginning of the show, we all sit down after Thanksgiving, hopefully, and chat about the good old days, as it were. But this is really a tribute that you can actually hold in your hands. And it's nice to have something more permanent. I know the stories, when they get retold, sometimes they can get embellished.
Yeah,
You know, it's nice to have something
I'd
that's
be lying if I didn't say there were some
that's
embellishments
permanent,
in there,
you know.
but not all that bad. Not that
And your sisters were okay with their portrayal?
Yeah. Gloria was funny. I told her that they're going to make a movie of it, and Scarlett Johansson's going to play her. And
Excellent.
She says,
I could see that.
Yeah, and she was just a wise guy about it. I won't go into but she was just a wise guy about it. And I said, they never change. No matter what age they are, they're still picking on the little brother.
And that's the good news too, you know. That's family. That's
Exactly.
That's how
yeah,
family
yeah.
works.
And we're able to communicate with one another and to tell it like it is. And
Right. And in this day and age, with the things that we see going on, you hear about families in crisis. How important do you feel a story like this is to teach people about what the meaning of family really is? I don't want you to preach too much, but
no,
you know,
very
your
important
opinion on that.
that you know it as it says in the teaser on the back of the book there. It gives you a chance to make your own memories for your family, and that's what life's all about: is
Right.
making memories for your family. And life is difficult. There's so many things going on, and so many issues, and you know, sometimes if you can just step back and say, it's important that I spend time with my family and I create good memories for them.
Right.
My children are grown up. My daughter Kim's 37. My son Billy's 33, and my son Tom's 27. They're all grown up and all married, and but they've got fond memories. They'll come back and say, you know, life was good. We did our best to try to make the memories for them.
And
I think that
isn't it true? Memories sustain you, really.
well, that's
Don't you
I think our objective as a parent is to try to make your kids' life a little better than yours was, or
That's
make the
true.
memories a little better. I don't think anyone could beat the memories I had. Again, is that life was a utopia. As a 9-year-old little mischievous little kid, I just had a wonderful time, and life changed.
And there's a lot of good visuals in here. My favorite is about the car itself. I won't get into too much, but the car that your brother brought back,
Yeah.
and I can imagine what a big deal that must have
It
been
really
in that
was.
era. And even the style of the car, because my dad
Yeah.
was a car buff. I knew exactly what car you were
Yeah,
talking
yeah,
about.
it-
That's
it
pretty
was,
wild.
and it was-
Nowadays, we're not impressed maybe as much with things as we
Yeah.
might have been then,
Yeah.
you know.
And like I said, he took care of everyone at Christmas. As I put, he got the great gifts and so forth. And yeah, no, it was
So if you
memorable
had a
time.
chance to say something to Jackie, what would you say?
I talk to him every day. I say thank you for for the short time you were here, the positive effect you left on many people. He was the kind of guy that you spent time with, and he just made you feel good. And he was a polite, considerate person. I don't make him out to be a saint, but
Right.
but he was the guys that I talked to that were in the service with him. I'll tell one story real quick. I talked to an enlisted guy, and he was a mechanic, and they were at a squadron party. And there's always been a line drawn that enlisted men and officers, and they don't cross that line. And Jackie was an officer; he was a lieutenant, and they were at a company get-together, and this particular guy had had a few drinks, and my brother Jackie said to him, "Hal, how are you getting home?" He said, "I don't know." He says, "You're coming with me. I know you got a wife and a couple of kids, and I want to make sure you get home safe." So he said, "Your brother went out of his way to give me a ride home and make sure I made it to the door okay." He says, "No officer would do that. That was unheard of, that an officer would do that for an enlisted man." He said, "That's the kind of guy your brother was." He said he was kind to he remembered where he came from. he knew that people worked hard for a living, and he was always polite to them. He said a lot of the guys I talked to said a lot of the pilots, they were hot shots, and they felt they were a cut above everyone else. He says, your brother was a humble person, and that made me feel good.
And isn't it good, too, that he accomplished so much in the short time he was here? It
A
kind of
short
makes
time.
you wonder, thinking about how he graduated so quickly and was kind of a bit of a daredevil by entering that program at the time in the Navy. It was very dangerous,
Yeah,
you know.
I look
so
at my-
you sort of
my-
have to think about the irony of the shortness of his life and what he managed to accomplish,
Yeah.
and the real mark he made on you and all the other people in Winchester.
At 23
It's
years
really
old, he
amazing.
was responsible for $1 million jet aircraft. At 23, I didn't want to let my kids drive my car.
Well, unfortunately, we have run out of time. I can't believe it. It's gone by so fast.
Well, I thank you. I
Thank
can't
you.
thank you enough. Wilmington is just one of my special towns. I have a couple of friends I'd like to
Oh,
say
please
hello
do.
to
Go
if
right
I can.
ahead. Sure.
Steve Borsetti, who I work with. I'm involved with Hub International, which is right up the street here in Wilmington. I work for one of their divisions, and Hub is a great company. Steve Borsetti's there, and Stephen Palmer, who's a very close friend of my son Billy, and Kenny Brandley, who I grew up with and has been a friend all my life, and all Wilmington people, and I love Wilmington, and I thank you so much for having
and
me
anybody
on.
you forgot, we'll just grandfather them in. You know who you are.
My wife, Maria.
You
I
better
have to
say
admit,
that one.
My wife, Maria,
You'll be
most
sleeping
important.
on the couch.
She's been my inspiration through my life. But honey, I love you, and I saved the best for last.
Good job. All right. So I want to thank you for being with us
Thank
today.
you.
Thank you for writing this book and for sharing with us. And hopefully when people do take a look at it, they can, as you said, create their own memories and really, build a legacy for their family.
Makes a great Christmas present. It's a great story.
Excellent. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much for watching. I want to remind you that you're watching Where's Wilmington with Lisa Capalla. And the next time somebody asks you, where's Wilmington, you tell them right here and right here on WCTV. Thanks for watching.